And we're back. Welcome back to the Bits and Bytes podcast, episode 16. Excited to be here today. I'm Matt Scott with my special guest and co-host.
I feel special, Matt. Thank you.
You should feel very special.
I'm Joey, but more importantly, we have Regional Sales Manager from Singlewire, Mr. Tom Willoughby, with us here today.
Awesome. Tom, we're really excited to have you with us. Thank you for making time out of your busy schedule. And, I think this is a big topic of conversation. We're going to be focusing on emergency communications, how important it is in the heat of the moment, how to be able to communicate effectively. What's the saying that Mike Tyson says? Everybody's got a plan until you're punched in the face, right? So I think it's a topic that is definitely on the top of many of our customers' minds. We had a breakout at our most recent Customer Innovation Summit on this. Thomas, why don't we, introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about, your history, your past, Singlewire, et cetera. Let's get a quick intro if you could.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, first of all, gentlemen, thanks for having me on, right? We appreciate you with the invite and everything. So I've been with Singlewire now for 7 years. Been in the critical notification business going on about 12 years. So I have worked in my history in the critical notification space, everything from very small school districts with less than 50 students, all the way up to Fortune 100 organizations that are looking to protect all of their facilities really across the world. So it's been, I guess we'll say, very interesting across the board, getting to see what a lot of these different folks are like and what they're looking to accomplish and how the technology has evolved over time as well.
Let me ask you a question. It feels like this is something that might possibly a lot of times be a secondary thought until something actually hits the fan, right? And maybe take a lay of the land. What is the market like, nowadays? I'm sure some of these major events have fast forwarded that to some places, but at the end of the day, a lot of times it comes down to budget, right?
So back in the day, right, it was very different. We actually used to get trained as salespeople when I first started to have these conversations around why an organization needed critical notification. That's not the case anymore, right? I think everybody is well aware that there is a lot of different types of emergencies that can happen within their organization, whether that be an active shooter situation or anything else, right? Political unrest or what have you. Most of them are now aware that there are a lot of different types of emergencies that can come their way. And I think they have a very different set of challenges nowadays. I'll just give you a quick example, right? So I just went and talked to a couple of customers, and they already have a lot of different hardware in their environments, right? So they're no longer at the point of, hey, I need emergency notification. They're more so at the point of, hey, I have a speaker system in place. I've got mobile phones that I can send alerts to. I've got desk phones on everybody's desk. I've got computers all over my facility, but I have no way to send alerts out to everybody in an emergency. And then what do I focus on from there? And who am I supposed to communicate with? And what are the protocols that we're supposed to be following, and so on and so forth? It's a shift, right? Because again, back in the day, you really need to have critical notification. Do we? This is kind of a cost center. And then we had to go and fight that battle. And nowadays it's, hey, we really need critical notification, but here's what we have in our environment. How can we make it work without having to spend too much money and do a complete system overhaul?
Yeah. I have to think the data is key to that. Having everybody's telephone numbers, the ability to message everybody in that situation. If you don't have the right people, that's where you start, right? Is that a good assumption or?
Yeah, it is. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to understand kind of where your gaps are. So I would say the first thing that they would really have to do is really have someone that comes in and do an assessment of the actual property, right? And say, hey, listen, here's where your gaps are, right? Do you have a way to send out mobile alerts? Do you have a way to do these things? And what you'll find is you're absolutely right. Some of your customers are going to come back to you and they're going to say, you know what? We have a tool that can send out mobile notifications, but we don't have any of our staff's phone numbers to be able to do that. Or another common one that you get is, yeah, we actually went ahead and bought a solution, but none of our staff want to receive alerts on their mobile devices because they have their own privacy concerns or other things along those lines, right? So there's a bunch of challenges that come up along the way of trying to make your organization safer, and it's like, you'll see as we kind of dive in a little bit further here on some of the things that we talk about here in the future. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges that organizations are trying to get over right now.
Yeah. Maybe walk us through a little bit about the single wire solution and how that's helping and differentiating, in the marketplace and kind of alleviating some of the challenges.
Again, prime example, right? So when we go into an organization nowadays, again, for the most part, they already have all the technology that they would need for communications within those environments. They have overhead paging systems. They have IP phones. They have desktops, laptops, mobile devices. They've got panic buttons even in some cases. But what they typically don't have is a way for them all to be communicating together from a single pane of glass. So I'm going to paint a perfect picture for you, right? Let's say that, God forbid, there's an active shooter situation that affects the facility, okay? If you have a paging system and you only have one way to access that paging system, say from a microphone that's in a closet somewhere, if you're not near that microphone, how are you really going to get an alert out to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you can only access that paging system from an IP phone. If you're not near the IP phone, what do you do then? How are you getting that alert out to everybody? Maybe you're a safe place outside the building. Who wants to be the person to go back into a building to pick up a phone or a microphone and get an announcement out to everybody? These are the things that Informacast really solve for a customer. It ties it all together, and then it gives them the ability to initiate these emergency notifications from wherever they are, and then target any individual or group of devices that we need to within that environment.
Yep.
Yeah, go into a little bit more about the critical mapping capabilities that Singlewire helps provide.
Yeah, so there's that's actually one of the newer features that we recently just developed, right? So when we talk about critical mapping, we're talking about like, hey, inside of our facility, these are the devices that we have, right? So if I want to send a notification specifically to this group of devices, and I know that there's an emergency that might be happening on the second floor or what have you, now from a map, I can quickly go in there and set a circle around all of those devices that are on that second floor and fire an alert off specifically to those devices. It's evolved because remember back in the day, think analog. If you got analog speaker system, you're going to a phone, you're broadcasting, it's just every device, right? That's already connected. Maybe you get a couple zones if they're pre-configured. But now, on the fly, you can select what devices you want to broadcast to. And then from there, if you know that there's an emergency that's happening in a specific area because a panic button was pressed, now we can view the camera that's pointed directly over at that panic button and see what's happening in real time. It's come so far. And that's really what that critical mapping is able to do for us.
That's powerful.
Yeah, not only that, but one of the things that Singlewire is really, really good at is streamlining existing technology. You talked about it before, Tom, but let's say you're an organization and you have said pieces to help during a response to an emergency, a crisis. You're not exactly sure if they all work together, if they work in tandem, are they working against each other? Do I have the bandwidth to really handle all this? What are the number one or two questions or concerns that you field as you take on some of these calls as regional sales manager? What are the concerns that these organizations have to ensure their own safety?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because if you think about these organizations that have recently had an incident or there was an incident that was nearby, they're all left asking themselves the same question, which is, what would happen if it was a real active shooter situation that was happening here? How would we respond to that? And from there, there's a level of questions, right, that you would probably ask yourself if you were in charge of that. And like one of those questions is probably, hey, if an active shooter walked in that building right now, how would I be made aware? Or how, if I'm responsible, would I make everyone else aware? And as you're going through that thought process, it's a little bit scary, right? Because you might think like, all right, if it came through this wing of the building, the only person that's over there is XYZ person. They're not trained to do anything. So what can we do to equip them? And you start kind of going through this total risk assessment in your head. And as you can tell, it's a lot to do in your head, right? So you bring in what we always recommend, right? Is you bring in law enforcement and you do an actual risk assessment. And that's why I think it's so critical. Have a relationship with that local law enforcement team. If there's an emergency, you're calling 911. Those are going to be the people that are coming to protect you. So protect yourself ahead of time and make sure that you're communicating with those folks. Have them come out on site and they'll tell you very frankly, hey, this is where your gaps are. And then from there, you get to create a system around that, utilizing your existing infrastructure. And that's where Informacast comes to play, because after that risk assessment is done, they say, you know what? You have absolutely no audio over here. There are no locks on this back door. If something bad is happening over here, you have no way to know. And now you actually have a response list. All right, here are my action items. These are the things that I've got to work on. And this is how Informacast fits into it, because it can tie it all together.
Let's touch on that a little bit, right? Because that is always a barrier, lack of a better term. A lot of times is, both of you have touched on it. We have this existing, investment. We can't make another investment. So it's essentially open API integration. Talk a little bit about, now that you've identified everything and the opportunities for improvement, what does that look like for an integration? Talk about the integration of Informacast and Singlewire.
Sure. So when we start having those conversations, right, the first thing that we do is we go through what they have for existing infrastructure. So the questions are things like, hey, what are you using for a phone system today? Is your existing paging system analog, or have you already upgraded to IP? And what are your future plans for those? Do you want to stay in an on-prem system? Do you want to go to the cloud? Are you interested in IP? And then, we dive into other things, like, can you send over some building plans? Like, can you actually send over floor plans? What do you have in the facility that you want to make sure is being used for critical notifications, for example, flashers and so on and so forth? And then once we understand all of that, what's so great about Informacast is that it was built using common-based protocols to communicate with just about any type of device that's already out there and being used in different facilities and locations. So whether it's analog or IP. And then from there, we just piece that puzzle together and we say, okay, now you have your single pane of glass. When you want to send an alert out to all of your phones and your desktops and your overhead system, we're going to combine those three systems into this one message template using our built-in common protocols. And then when you press this button, it sends an alert out to all of those at the exact same time. And then it evolves from there, right? So they're going to tell us, okay, well, we're interested in protecting ourselves from an active shooter. We want to send out things for like medical communications and so on and so forth. And then you can also create those scenarios as well, so that everything is pre-built when those situations arise.
And I've even seen technology that makes it possible to identify a gun in the parking lot. So when these situations happen, every second passes, that's a second that somebody's losing a life. Those clips empty fast, and that's the reality. I see flags at half staff in my city. It's disgusting, but this is the world we live in. And oftentimes, the response teams may even be on site, but they don't know what's happening until the police and ambulances roll up. They see lights and they hear sirens. Again, to your point, if they're not in a part of the building or not receiving said notifications, they're as good as useless.
Thomas, Informacast and Singlewire, they help get the word out appropriately and dispersed. Is there any kind of reverse communication that is provided to help inform authorities that might be responding, as well as they're coming in from a standpoint of, a certain sensor is going off or a certain area is providing an incident, etc.?
Yeah. So that's where technology has made such a huge improvement over the past 12 years, right? Because all of the new IOT devices that are coming out, I mean, now we have gunshot detection systems, right? And
Gas.
I've got spillage sensors that can detect floods, all sorts of different sensors that are out there, right? And all of them can now be tied into Informacast. So I'll just paint a picture for you. If a shot is detected, it can automate a notification that goes out to the entire facility that puts them into lockdown mode. That shot doesn't even have to be in the building, right? You can have shot detection systems outside. There's also systems that are even more proactive than that. So I'll give you an example of what just happened down in Florida. I don't know if you heard about the story from that school district down there, but a student got online and was making a comment that he was going to go to XYZ school and shoot it up. And because that school district had such a good relationship with the local law enforcement, they did their investigation and were made aware of it as soon as the kid posted it. And then they arrested him before he even had a chance to go out on site. That's the type of proactive approach that saves lives, right?
To your point, Joey, that it hits home. I feel so bad for a lot of the youth that is in the world today. And I know I say youth, there's a lot of sick individuals anyways that, can do horrific stuff, just from individually themselves. But I say youth because I personally have a middle school teenager, and the pressures of the world today. Let's face it, middle school sucks anyway. It always sucks. Middle school is the worst transition years. They're learning how to be an adult and grow, and the hormones and all the pressures nowadays of the social media and stuff. I feel so bad every time that I hear these incidents because it's not always their fault. The difference of the shift in mindset that's going on in their head and stuff like this. So being able to prepare and potentially stop that and then help improve them as a person, because they're kids, right? So a lot of the times it doesn't take away from anything, but it is the world that we're in today. So I'll say right now, Thomas, thank you for doing your part, because what you're doing is saving lives. And we're actually having this come from a lot of partners of interest in saying, hey, tell me more, because we've shared this out with many of our local governments, our education verticals. And, as people are becoming more in the know of the capabilities and ability to enable it without this massive rip and replace type of mindset, it's something that is a definitely added benefit into the IT stack of any organization or, governmental entity to be able to provide that level of communication when needed. So thank you.
That was a lot. I feel like that was a sermon. Pass the offering plate. Now I'm gonna pick up that offering plate and but I'm gonna expound on that. You're right.
I mean, it does make me think. It's we're seeing it firsthand. So
Yeah.
is where I'm going.
Well, you talked about government, Matt, and one of the things that came to my mind is being compliant with Alyssa's law. Can you go into a little bit about how Singlewire is helping organizations do just that?
Yeah, absolutely. So most organizations right now are interested in really two things. There is the protocols that are in place that they need to follow for emergency situations. So I don't know if you all are familiar with Alice protocol, but we can dive into that a little bit. And then there's also the actual compliance laws. So Alyssa's law. And Alyssa's law is an interesting one because there are several different states that have their own version of the law. And then you have certain people that are following the letter of the law versus others that are following the spirit of the law, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Letter of the law communication in certain states require there to be a panic button in each school. And if you press that panic button, it'll send out a text message and a phone call, and that technically meets the letter of the law. But the spirit of the law is we should have a panic button probably in every classroom. So if there's an emergency that pops up, we press that button, and then not only does it just send a text message out, but it sends an alert out to the local security resource officers across all of their devices so that they're made aware and can come and assist. And that we alert local PSAP so they can immediately make their way over and start assisting. And then we can do other things like lock down the building and make sure that, people aren't, that person isn't able to just freely walk through the facility in the midst of an emergency. There's a lot of different ways that we contribute to that. And that actually bleeds right into, what we're doing as far as like the Alice protocol stuff. So let's kind of walk through that. So if you're not familiar with Alice, it's an acronym. And what it stands for is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. Okay, that's what your Alice stands for. So alert is all around being able to initiate emergency notifications from wherever you're located. Okay? And that is what is so convenient. That's what basically ties right into Alyssa's law. You got your panic button that's conveniently located. But now we work with some great solutions that are out there that create these wearable badges. And now you've got a panic button wherever you're located. So like Centegix, Contact.io, both of them offer great solutions there. But you press the button and it registers either to the nearest access point or to a portal beam, which they provide. And it tells you with room level accuracy where that user is.
Positioning. Yep. Yeah.
Right. And then obviously, if maybe you forget that badge, right, you still got stationary panic buttons. You can also use your IP phones, but it's all around initiating that alert from wherever you're located. And then the first thing that's supposed to happen from there is you're supposed to initiate into a lockdown procedure. So that is where you get an alert out to everybody that's within a specific facility that says, all right, we are now in a lockdown state. We do that with either tying through the overhead systems, putting notifications on desktops. Again, going back to that conversation earlier, whatever infrastructure you have, we're going to take advantage of that to make sure that you understand this is a lockdown situation. And then it comes down to the I, which is the informed piece of this. And that is making sure that the proper people are informed, right, during that emergency. And that can mean a lot of different things. So one is you want to make sure that the PD is made aware. And then they should get all of the rich detail with that too, right? This is a certain type of situation. This is where they're located within the facility and so on. But then there's actually a whole lot of internal communication that needs to take place as well, right? So let's say, for example, we have security resource officers and administrators and then so on. One of the things that Informacast can actually do is tie all of those people into the same chat space, into like a WebEx space, and they can communicate about the ongoing situation that's happening. And then right from that same space can send further notifications. So prime example, let's say somebody initiated a lockdown alert, but now the situation's all clear. We can initiate an all clear and everyone's on the same page about why that all clear was initiated and by the first real-time communication. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And then it gets into counter and then of course evacuate, and Informacast does a fantastic job there with that as well as sending the alert out to evacuate a facility or what have you.
So I'm thinking through, as an organization head, I'm thinking, okay, we have covered all of the worst case scenario things. But what about organizations or schools that have like these giant events? And so you have an influx of hundreds, if not thousands of parents, brothers, sisters, uncles, grandparents, all coming in for this giant event in a huge auditorium. What could go wrong, right? What is Singlewire doing to help with visitor screening and visitor aware, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things that we can do there. So first thing, as soon as somebody actually walks into a facility, there's a check-in kiosk. And what's great about that visitor aware experience now is you can have multiples of these kiosks set up. They're all tied into the same system. And they can use existing iPads and Chromebooks. So there's not a significant hardware investment that needs to be made here. They'll just pull out a cart, get them set up, pull up the app, right? And then you can put them on these nice little stations. But regardless, when they go to check in, all they do is they scan their ID really quick, and then they smile at the camera. And what our software does is it takes the name from that user, their date of birth, their address, and also captures a facial recognition profile. Cross-references all of that against the sexual predator databases, FBI watch lists, Interpol, and so on, and then is able to pull back within a fraction of a second if that person is allowed to enter into the facility or not. What it actually appears like to that person, let's say that it was somebody that wasn't supposed to be in the building, it looks like a loading screen, and automatically a notification is then delivered back to your security resource officers or whoever else that needs to be made aware to obviously come over there and handle that situation and make sure that they're not allowed into that facility. And then you can do pre-batch loads too. So if, like you said, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of people coming on site for a single event, like a graduation or whatnot, all of that can be pre-batched so that when users are coming in, all their badges are already printed off and everything. And you can send out an email to all parents and say, hey, if you're planning on coming in for the day, please fill out this following form. And then when they get there, all they have to do is smile at the camera and they're good to go and walk in.
Sounds like TSA.
Yeah, it's basically TSA pre-check at that point.
Better safe than sorry, though. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Being in an auditorium full of strangers, it's like being in the middle of the movie theater. Nowadays, it's like I'm always looking around. My head's always on a swivel, but it's good to know that it's true. And going back to the conversation earlier about, our kids, I have one that's in second grade and I have another one that's going to be in kindergarten next year. And my oldest came home from this drill at school, they didn't even let us know about it. There was no communication. He got off the bus and he was kind of flustered. And my wife asked him, what's going on, dude? And he was just like, so we did this drill and it was really scary. And so we had to contact the school. There was zero communication about it. It would have been nice to know, because that's kind of important. I don't need to know before you do it, because obviously you want the kids to not be ready for it. It's kind of a moment thing where you want to just test their knowledge of them and the staff. But like, as a parent, I feel like there could have been more effective communication. And
So you could deal with it after.
yeah, and that way I have time to prep for this conversation, because it's a big conversation to have, especially with somebody in elementary school. In middle, that's the next level, but that's where the stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to think too. I mean, instantaneously when you think about a emergency incident response, people jump to these horrific, events, mass casualty and all that stuff. But I think even from like a weather perspective, I mean, weather is another, incident that comes on quick, needs to be communicated effectively.
Medical emergency.
Something happens even after the weather, right? So being able to understand where, people are, if a facility is damaged, right? And, being able to see where people are and being able to respond quick and effectively. In the interest of time on an emergency response, time is lives, right? So I have to think, that's another aspect that this is being integrated and leveraged into as well. Is that Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to what Joey was just saying there. So this actually just happened as a recent situation with my own nephew, was texted his parents and said there's an active shooter situation that's happening over at our school.
Whew.
And the 3 hours went by and they weren't able to get any communication. So they were in an absolute panic, as you can imagine, trying to call the school, trying to get some updates, so on and so forth. It was a lockdown drill. They were doing a drill. That's why it's so critical to send out communication to parents and do it to social media platforms and so on, and make people aware that it's a drill, because they were in absolute panic for a couple hours when they didn't need to be. Now, yeah, there are so many other things too outside the realm of like just active shooter notifications. And you're absolutely right. Weather is a very big one, especially where I live now, which is down here in Dallas, Texas. Most of the major districts are actually using Informacast for weather communications. What's great about it is it automates the notifications. So how that functions is you can set a radius in our software around each of the schools. And effectively, you can set that radius to whatever you want. About 5 miles, 10 miles, gets customized within the actual software itself. When there is some type of weather situation, like a tornado or what have you, it can automate its way all the way down to all of the endpoints within that school. So imagine putting people into a shelter-in-place type of situation. Automatically, it has the ability to do that. And we got some schools that don't like that. So, for example, up in the Northeast, when they have like blizzard warnings and things along those lines, they don't want those type of automated notifications to go through, obviously. But they get sent over to a facilities manager or something like that, where they can then approve that notification and then get sent out to everybody else if they need to. And then again, Informacast can even be used for other things, like sending the alert out to the general public after that, letting them know, hey, we're going to be closed tomorrow because of weather or what have you. So,
yeah. And I think, one of the things that you talked about was even setting people up for the preparation and expectations of, like, from time to time, hey, just a heads up, this is how we will communicate to you if there is a situation. There is such thing as too much communication where people become numb, to your point, like, around blizzards or whatnot. If they're like, this ain't no blizzard, I'm going to go, we're fine up here. Whereas if, in the South here, somebody, says the word blizzard, they're like, grab the bread, grab the milk,
Grab the beer.
So when you're sending out too many communications, people become numb to it. But there is also that preparation of, hey, this is our declared way of communicating and in an event of emergency, so that people know when that comes through. And this means this is an emergency and to be ready for it.
Well, and aware. One thing that came to my mind was, one of the number one killers in America is heart disease. People have heart attacks all the time. I mean, I love that Singlewire is thinking ahead. And I'm not trying to be a brand guy here. It floored me how far ahead you guys think. So when somebody's going to the defibrillator, and I know I just butchered that word, defib, you know what I mean? The box with the thing inside, you can do the paddles clear.
3 times fast.
It's huge because you talk about seconds. It's real life. Like, people need to know what's going on when somebody's opening that. It's literally like, hey, somebody opened the fire extinguisher door. I mean, obviously there's an emergency. We need to get them here now, not 30 seconds from now. When somebody finds their phone, I mean, sometimes I don't even know where my phone is. I need to call 911, and everybody's thinking somebody else will do it. Somebody else is going to do it.
It's such a good point, Joey. Like, when the case opens, or if a fire extinguisher is removed,
Boom.
cue the situation, right? So,
And they know what part of the building, everything, where to hone in the focus. It's massive.
It's right along the same lines of the IOT integration piece, right? So there's the Internet of Things is just growing tremendously. So now we can make any of those devices with, basically just these little zone controllers and they're just, think of it as a momentary box, dry contact that's connected to the network. And you can make any of those types of devices also connected to the network now. So yeah, it extends out the Internet of Things, and I've seen that being used for so many different things. So you're absolutely right. Those defibrillator cabinets are big, opening up, we've seen this a lot in chemistry labs, showers in the chem labs. If somebody elevates one of those, it can send out a notification. You get the point. And, this is how crazy the Internet of Things is getting, right? So like now you got the vape sensors that they're putting in bathrooms, right? So if somebody were to, smoke a vape pen, that can actually trigger a notification and have it sent off. You've got spillage sensors. So if anything, any like moisture is detected or what have you, that can send out a notification. The largest poultry manufacturer in the United States actually utilizes us for IOT thermometers. So they've got obviously millions of dollars of poultry, as you can imagine, in refrigerated areas. If those go outside of a certain range, those need to initiate notifications.
yeah.
It's just continuously growing as well. So yeah, I mean, you name it.
It's huge.
Specific device can do it.
Yeah, that's huge. I foresee it being, essentially the hub and communication across the board, and it's only going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
It makes me think too, like with the IoT stuff that you're referring to, and this is another segment that we did, but the amount IoT, the way that it's growing so fast, it always hasn't been on the IT, manager's radar. So we've been focusing a lot on security of, your network to the IoT, and, the amount of things that are, being connected and how they connect, and making sure that you have the proper boundaries and stuff. So it's all kind of working together, and that's what we really appreciate with what we do here. And this is not a pitch slap, so oh boy, don't go there, minute up, but no, I mean, that is the single biggest point of value that ByteWorks is delivering to our customers, is this holistic approach of, a comprehensive solution in what they're trying to accomplish for their needs to our partners, not just this pigeonholed, hey, we focus on this aspect and stuff like that. It's, how all these things come together and how all these things help you. So Thomas, we really appreciate you for what you're doing, for taking the time with us. I know we're coming up here on time.
Before we go, what's the one or two best ways for somebody to find out if they're doing this right, if they're compliant with regulations? Let's say you're a member of the school board, or you're a decision maker at a huge organization, or just somebody that really, really cares about your staff and your customers. What's the best way to engage a conversation to find out if I'm doing it right?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing that they should do is audit their existing communication tools and protocols. Okay. So most organizations already have a protocol that they choose to follow for emergency preparedness. And if they do not have that, I would say that should be your first flag, where you should do some type of assessment to find out what your protocol is going to be for your organization. And there are a few: Alice Protocol, Run, Hide, Fight. There are others as well. Once you've understood what your actual protocol is that your organization is choosing to follow, Then do an audit of the communication tools that are within that environment. And are you actually taking care and utilizing all of those tools within an emergency situation? And how often are you testing those tools too? Right? That's also another very, very big piece of it, because I can't tell you how many organizations that we've gone into that said, you know what? Yeah, we're already doing this. We can send out alerts in an emergency. And then when they go to test it, it's not working, or it hasn't worked in 4 years, or what have you.
Or does everybody know how to do it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, it's part of the training process. Yeah.
And you know what, again, not to pitch in Informacast too much. I know we didn't want to do this, but I'll tell you this. One of the things that you can do as well as you do your general communications through Informacast. So when you do that, like let's say you're a school district and you have your bells piking through Informacast, every time you do that, you're simultaneously testing your emergency notification system. So rather than doing things once a month or whatever, you can do this on a daily basis. And there's things that you can do for your general alerts and morning announcements that will allow you to really test and protect yourselves daily.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Good
Yeah.
perspective. Ironically, as we were sitting here, I got a notification about my daughter's bus, a text message. So, even thinking outside of the school, but like within the same realms, right? So like, I know that majority of the buses now are, captured and from location standpoint and stuff. So
I have an app to track the bus when my oldest gets off the bus. It lets me know approximately how far off he is. So it's great.
yep.
I love it.
So, hey, I love that call to action, those recaps of the steps of, ways that people can proactively take this approach. I'm excited to have more conversations with you again, Tom, with more customers. And I only see this growing. In fact, I know one of our largest customers, we had a conversation with him, I think yesterday. It's something that is needed. It's something that you guys are doing very well. And we're proud to be a strategic partner with you guys. So Thomas, thank you for taking time with us. Really appreciate it. This is Bits and Bytes podcast number 16. Follow us. Let's go.
Go Eagles!